as law enforcement continues to search for missing Native American Jermain Charlo.
Years ago today, Jermain Charlo went missing from Missoula.
It's been almost 3 years since Jermain Charlo went missing from Missoula.
Hi, well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jermain.
What else was happening in Jermain's life in the days, months, even years before she disappeared? What we uncovered was an incredibly heartbreaking and frustrating story of a young woman who experienced a lot of violence in her very, very short life. I'm an investigative reporter and host of the podcast Stolen, The Search for Jermain. Jermain Charlo is a young Indigenous woman who is missing. She's been missing since 2018. She's the mother of 2 young kids. She's a granddaughter, a niece, a sister, and she has so many people who love her and are desperate for any information about her disappearance. She was captured on surveillance footage leaving a bar in downtown Missoula called the Badlander. She was seen walking away from the bar down this alley. She turned a corner and she was never seen again.
Searching for her as if she's still alive, and that's our biggest hope, is that when we find her, she's still with us.
And Jermain is part of a really close-knit family from the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. She's incredibly close to her grandmother, her yaya, Vicky Morgeau. And the very next day, as soon as Vicky couldn't get a hold of Jermain, she was immediately worried. It was almost 2 weeks before police actually started their investigation into her disappearance.
The lack of credible sources, we haven't really heard any evidence. She just vanished.
They felt like law enforcement just didn't take her case seriously at the beginning, and now it's been over 3 years since Jermain went missing, and her family is still searching for answers and still desperately trying to bring Jermain home. The lead detective, Guy Baker, has maintained that this has always been an open and active case.
Lead detective on this case, Guy Baker, told us they continue to follow leads, conduct interviews. He added there has been several persons of interest in this case. However, they are still unsure of what happened to Charlo.
In August, he made an arrest on an unrelated firearms charge. He arrested Jermain Charlo's ex-boyfriend, Michael DeFrance, who was the last person who's known to be seen with Jermain.
That's my boyfriend. He's probably not going to be happy because I'm telling him to start vlogging on YouTube, but if he does watch this, love you and I miss you.
But I also wanted to understand what led to that night in June. And what we discovered was a young woman who unfortunately experienced a lot of violence in her life. And I think that is such an important thing to raise awareness about, because, Jermain Charlo was a victim of violence, but so was every woman in her family that we spoke to. Indigenous women and girls face some of the highest rates of violence in the United States and in Canada. And the reason for that is complicated and complex, and is really connected back to our history and connected back to colonialism and the impacts of colonialism on Indigenous people across North America. There's really a crisis of violence that so many Indigenous women and girls in Canada and in the United States face. It's really underreported, and these stories need more attention. They need more resources. Our stories are so underrepresented, and even when they are, they do occasionally break through, it's often misrepresented. The truth is that nobody knows how many Indigenous women and girls are missing in the United States or Canada.
Those that have lost their lives because of a sacrifice.
Yep.
We're here because of them.
Or how many have been murdered, or how many are victims of other forms of violence. There are so many reasons why these cases don't get the coverage they deserve. It has to do with the total underreporting of any Indigenous issues. So few Indigenous stories break out into the mainstream. And also there's, I think, a crisis of misrepresentation in the media. Who's deciding which stories are important and which stories deserve attention? What I'm trying to do is subvert the popularity of this true crime genre and use the power of storytelling to engage people in these stories and in these issues. And I think that it's my job as a journalist to help people realize that they should care and to help people understand how those things are impacting this crisis of violence that we face, how those things impacted Jermain Charlo in her life, and how it's important for us as journalists and storytellers to connect the dots back to that history and to tell the full story. Because until we understand the truth, we really can't begin to address these problems.